fue lo peor que vivió durante el COVID, la pandemia?
Encerramiento.
Encerramiento, el confinamiento.
Situación pues me ha tocado trabajar aquí en vendedor ambulante, porque yo trabajo en seguridad, no he podido volver a conseguir trabajo.
Ingresos graves, gracias a Dios pues había algo de ahorros de hace unos años atrás y tocó, como se dice, tocó echarle mano a esos ahorros de 2, 3, 4 años atrás para poder sobrevivir, porque en este sector trabajamos mucho con solo universitarios y hasta hace un mes y medio o 2 meses que ingresaron, de lo contrario no se hacían ni siquiera 5.000 pesos diarios.
Las ventas tomaron mucha desconfianza en la calle, nadie compraba por desconfianza y mucho tiempo enclaustrado, pues tocó tomar determinaciones de empeñar prendas, televisor, todo para conseguir métodos de mercado, cosas por el estilo, sí.
Creo que no mucho, por este lado casi no llegaron ayudas, no llegó nada. Le doy gracias a Dios porque pues la única ayuda fue lo que yo tenía ahorradito y pude subsistir con eso.
These are just a few examples of street vendors who had to go through very difficult situations during the pandemic. But we must be clear about this. They are not extraordinary cases. This is a reality in the country. Our team, Isabela, Veronica, Diego, Andres, and myself, Sebastian, want to tell another phase of the pandemic and the suffering it caused in a lot of homes. It is important to mention that in Colombia, before the arrival of the virus, informality was the norm in Colombia, reaching rates of up to 47% of the people with jobs, not to mention the unemployed ones. Likewise, street vendors represent a high number, with 39,620 in the country's capital alone. With the arrival of the new virus in the country on March 6, 2020, these rates were severely affected. The virus came with a destruction of lives and household incomes. As time went on, the number of infected cases skyrocketed, and at the same time, some jobs fell drastically as well. Also, the income of many households fell, and the only thing that they increased was the time citizens had to stay in quarantine for the general good. All these factors start to make visible a new problem. Life is not only threatened by a virus, but also by a lack of food and basic elements. Some heartbreaking scenes began to seen in the city, like people screaming for money in the streets, and a red handkerchief hanging in the windows of some houses as a sign that they had nothing to eat. All these lead people like street vendors to enter into a very difficult dilemma: to go out to look for the money to eat that day, or to take care of themselves and respect the quarantines, so as not to get infected with COVID. A clear example of this dilemma, like I said before, is expressed by street vendors, people who often live on the income of the day and often work for their families too. Their business operates thanks to the traffic on the streets. Their infrastructure only satisfies the demand of people passing by, and their income is basically the difference between what they manage to sell and what it costs them to get their merchandise. So, what options do these people really have?
With everything that has been said, what did the government do? First, they helped informal vendors in zonal planning units with quarantine. For informal workers and informal vendors in the areas, the Alcaldía Bogotá has provided them with some workspaces so that they get linked to local alcaldías and help them with the management of public space. but also to those who are not required it or are not interested, a wallet card loaded with 120,000 pesos was given so they can make basic purchases during the isolation period. Second, the public policy of informal sellers. This policy was designed with the purpose to reduce the levels of poverty and inequality associated with the phenomenon of informal sales in the public space. Regarding to the call to actions, we are going to outline 3. The first is the prevention and immediate action against the virus. Second, initiatives by the public sector, private sector, and NGOs to help informal workers. And lastly, digitalization guide to help activate participation in the economy. Finally, some conclusions according to the testimonies and the information provided are that the street sellers still can regain pre-pandemic stability. We have to reflect on the situation of these people and we must have more empathy. And lastly, despite the public policy for informal sellers, this wasn't enough.